I saw her do it. She thought I wasn't paying attention. Standing in the gleaming kitchen, wearing an apron without a single stain, my mother-in-law, Margaret, tilted a small glass vial ever so slightly, letting a few drops of clear liquid fall into a wine glass. No scent, no color, no hesitation. Then she turned around, offering that familiar smile, the kind of smile that says she just did something, out of love. "A special cocktail for my dear son-in-law," she said, her voice sugar sweet to the point of being sharp. I nodded, smiled back, but inside, my heart dropped like a stone. Silently, I picked up both glasses, as if I were just helping her carry them to the table. On the way to the dining room, I switched their places. The glass with the special touch no longer belonged to me. The one who would drink it was Robert, her husband. 45 minutes later, he started sweating cold, his face turned pale, and he staggered to his feet and rushed to the bathroom. The sound of vomiting echoed through the old-style house, silencing the entire dinner table. I looked up, caught Margaret's eyes. She looked at me, and I looked right back. And in that single moment, I understood two things. First, my mother-in-law really had drugged my drink. And second, she now knew I'd figured it out. I didn't react, didn't say a word. I just sat there, quietly eating a bite of chocolate cake for dessert, while Claire, my wife, ran after her father in the chaos. I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let this go easily. But I also wasn't going to play by their rules. My name is Ethan Rowe, 32 years old, a freelance photographer living in Asheville, North Carolina. I started from scratch, climbing my way up with nothing but an old camera and a pair of worn-out shoes. From weddings, wildlife, to photo essays for nature and travel magazines. I love what I do, because it gives me freedom, and because I'm good at it. But in my in-laws' eyes, that's never been enough. Robert, my father-in-law, used to work in investment finance. He's the kind of man who defines success by square footage and bank accounts. Every time we had dinner with my wife's family, he'd ask with a knowing tone, "How's that photography hobby of yours going, Ethan?" He didn't need to say much more. The way he hit the word, hobby, told me everything I needed to know. Margaret, my mother-in-law, wasn't as blunt. She was subtler, sharper. She'd compliment my photos, then gently ask, "When do you think you'll settle into a real job? Or are you planning to just drift around forever?" At family gatherings, she never introduced me as her son-in-law. It was always Claire's husband, the freelance photographer. Claire is my wife. We met 6 years ago at a small art exhibit where I was showing my first landscape photos. At the time, she was finishing her master's thesis in environmental science. I was drawn to her eyes, bright, clear, and full of purpose. Claire loved the natural world, and I loved how fiercely she fought to protect it. We came together like opposites that simply fit, quietly filling in each other's gaps. But her family never saw it that way. From the very first meeting, Robert made his disappointment clear. He'd hoped Claire would fall in love with and marry a man who had life insurance, a retirement plan, and a company car. In other words, he wanted her to marry himself, a younger, shinier version. Margaret didn't have to say much. I overheard her on the phone last Christmas. Claire could have married Thomas, remember? A doctor, from a good family, and yet she picked that drifter photographer. The way she paused on the word, picked, then tossed in, drifter, made it sound like Claire had committed some terrible crime. I tried hard to earn their respect. I brought expensive bottles of wine every holiday. I showed them my articles, the contracts with major magazines. I told them about my latest assignment, trekking through forests, climbing mountains, capturing every fleeting moment of the natural world. But to them, it was all just a phase, a youthful game, something Claire would eventually wake up from and leave behind. There were things I never told Claire. I kept the snide remarks from her parents to myself. I swallowed the times they accidentally left me out of family photos. I ignored the pitiful looks when I talked about a photo project I was proud of. I did all of that because I didn't want to make Claire choose sides. She loved her parents, even if they were cold, even if they never said, "I'm sorry." Even if they sometimes hurt her, she still saw them as a piece of her that couldn't be cut away. I didn't want to break that. So every time Robert questioned my income like he was auditing my pay stub, I just forced a smile. Every time Margaret ignored my words and turned to Claire with another question, I pretended not to notice. I still shook his hand firmly, still complimented her roast chicken, even when the taste in my mouth was still bitter from all the quiet insults. But what was hardest to stomach was how little they thought of what I brought to the table. When Claire and I announced we were trying to have a baby, Robert pulled me aside. He spoke softly, but every word cut like a blade. Kids are expensive, son. Maybe think about getting a real job before bringing one into the world. I remember my throat tightening. I looked him in the eye. I didn't see concern, just cold judgment. I didn't tell Claire, because I was afraid. Afraid she'd be hurt. Afraid she'd feel torn between two men, her husband and her father. I chose silence. But the signs, they piled up over time. Margaret always found a reason to call Claire into the kitchen whenever I mentioned a success. Whenever I started talking about an exhibition or a photo that had made a magazine cover, Margaret would chime in with, "Claire, can you help me get dessert?" As if they didn't want to hear it, or couldn't accept that I might actually be succeeding in my own way. Another time, after dinner, Robert suggested Claire see a therapist because she had a tendency to make impulsive decisions. He said it while staring right at me. I still pretended not to hear. I kept thinking, just give it time, and they'll come around. Just be patient, and they'll see I truly love Claire. That I'm not just some passing phase in her life. That I'm here, and I'm staying. I was wrong. It was a winter evening. I had just returned from Montana, after a 6-day assignment photographing bison crossing the snow-covered prairie. The wind was like knives against my face. My fingers numb even through triple-layered gloves. My memory cards were full of rare, breathtaking shots. This set alone would cover 3 months' rent. I was exhausted. All I wanted was a hot shower and to collapse into bed. But Claire gently took my hand, her eyes soft but firm. "It's Mom's birthday today, just a few hours, okay?" I nodded. I showered, put on a clean shirt, combed my hair. Then we drove to her parents' mansion, a traditional hilltop house that always made me feel like an uninvited guest. Dinner started off like usual. Robert went on about his latest closed deal. Margaret was obsessing over the napkin folds like a single crease would ruin the whole evening. Claire's brother, Nathan, and his wife, Lena, sat across from us, making just enough small talk to avoid awkwardness. I just sat there, holding my beer, silently counting the minutes. Then came dessert. Margaret stood up, beaming. "I made sangria from a new recipe, it's very special." She went into the kitchen. I got up and called after her. "Let me help bring it out." Margaret froze. Her eyes darted around, quick as lightning. Then she smiled. "Oh no, Ethan, I've got it." But I had already stepped into the kitchen. And I saw, on the counter, 2 sangria glasses were set apart, different from the rest on the tray. And Margaret, my mother-in-law, was pulling a small dropper bottle from her coat pocket, like the kind used for eye drops. She tilted it slightly. A few drops of clear liquid fell into one of the 2 glasses. As soon as she heard my footsteps, she jumped and tucked the bottle back into her pocket. "Oh, Ethan, I'm just about to bring them out. This glass is especially for you, my own special recipe. You'll love it." I looked at the drink. The chandelier light reflected a faint film across the surface. No smell, no taste, nothing unusual, unless you'd just seen her put something in it. My throat went dry, but I still smiled, and picked up both glasses. "Let me carry them out, just to be safe." Back at the table, Robert was looking at his phone. No one was paying attention. I quietly placed the special glass in front of him. "Moi cha, sangria non lam du," I said it calmly, pleasantly, almost playfully. Then I poured myself a glass of water. 15 minutes, 20, 30. That's when Robert started to shift in his seat. Sweat formed along his hairline. He reached for the table, tried to stand, but had to grip the chair for balance. I'm not feeling well." And then he stumbled toward the bathroom. The sound of violent retching echoed through the house. Everyone turned pale. Claire jumped up in a panic and rushed to check on him. I stayed seated, spoon in hand, gently stirring the melting ice cream. Across the table, Margaret's eyes met mine, her face, ghost white. We stared at each other. No words. But I was sure of one thing. She knew exactly what had just happened. And she knew that I knew. That night, I couldn't sleep. Claire was worried sick, calling to check on her dad. Her mom danced around the truth. It was probably some bad seafood. Or, he must have had too much to drink on an empty stomach. I said nothing. But I knew that wasn't it. While everyone else panicked, I quietly took back the untouched sangria, the special glass Margaret had made just for me. I washed it carefully, but I saved a small sample in a glass vial. I'm not a scientist, but I know someone who is. Jason, an old friend and former wedding client, now running a small private lab for pharmaceutical and chemical testing. I called him. Briefly. It's personal, family related. Do I need to call the police? Not yet, but if the test shows what I think it will, maybe. 3 days later, Jason called back. Ethan, the sample you gave me contains benzodiazepine. Not lethal, but enough to make someone drowsy, disoriented. Can even cause short-term memory loss in higher doses. I sat in silence, heart frozen, each beat heavy. Where did you get this? A family dinner, at my in-laws. Jason was quiet for a moment. I'll send you the report, with full analysis and official stamp. Be careful, man. That night, I didn't say anything to Claire. I made up an excuse, something about needing to prep for an upcoming gallery. Asked if I could skip the next few Sunday dinners. She agreed, a little sad, but didn't press. I needed time to understand why Margaret had done this. So I started digging. First, the medical records. Let's just say, I found a way to access them. Turns out Margaret had 3 different prescriptions. From 3 different doctors. All for the same drug, Xanax. She'd been taking doses double, sometimes triple the recommended amount, for years. Then I started asking around. Neighbors. One neighbor mentioned how Margaret had once screamed during a party, accusing a guest of stealing her bracelet, only for it to later turn up under her own sofa. At her ladies' club, there were whispers that she once slipped sleeping pills into another woman's tea, after an argument over seating arrangements. Rumors, all unproven. No one ever filed a complaint. The family had money, connections. Every mess was swept away behind expensive curtains, polished silverware, and carefully managed silences. Me? I didn't have wealth, didn't have influence, but I had something else. I had the truth, and I had time, and I knew how to wait for the right moment. 2 weeks after the birthday dinner, Claire came to me, surprised. Mom wants some portraits for her profile. She asked specifically for you to take them. I almost laughed. After everything, she could still pretend like none of it had happened. I nodded. Sure, let me go alone. Saturday morning, I arrived with my camera over my shoulder. A sealed envelope in my leather bag. Inside the envelope, the toxicology report from Jason's lab, photocopies of Margaret's prescriptions, and a signed written statement from her neighbor. Margaret opened the door. Ethan, thank you so much for coming. She was dressed immaculately, a hint of perfume in the air, her hair perfectly styled, as if today's photo shoot were a magazine cover. My father-in-law, Robert, wasn't home. The house was quiet, too quiet, like it was bracing for a grand performance. Before she could say anything more, I placed an envelope on the coffee table. Before we shoot, you might want to take a look at this. She picked it up, opened it. I saw her fingers tremble slightly as her eyes stopped at the line. Component analysis. Benzodiazepine. Sample taken from suspicious liquid in wine glass. Followed by a list of 3 prescriptions. All with the same doctor's name. This is fabricated, she said, voice shaking. I never. Stop lying. I cut her off. I didn't yell. I wasn't angry. I was calm, cold. We both know what happened. What I don't understand is why you did it. She looked up. Her eyes no longer dodged mine. Because you're not good enough for my daughter. Her voice was sharp as a razor. I held my breath. A man should be able to provide for his wife and child. He should have a stable job, not someone wandering around photographing birds like a starving artist. I didn't respond. You blinded Claire. You made her give up everything, her career, her opportunities, her big dreams. I just wanted her to wake up. I looked her straight in the eyes. By drugging me? Making me collapse on the night of my exhibition? So Claire would think I was irresponsible? Margaret clenched her hands. Not enough to kill you. Just enough to make you miss that show. A small fall. So Claire could see you're not someone she can rely on. Her voice was like a clean, sharp blade. Steady. Unrepentant. I nodded slowly. Then here's what's going to happen. I pulled out my phone. Pressed play. It was a recording. Audio ripped from security camera footage during the party. Margaret screaming at her husband. You drank the wrong glass. When her voice played, that was for Ethan. Her face went pale. I have the footage, the chemical analysis, witness testimony from your neighbors, and the prescriptions you've been hiding from Claire all this time. I stepped closer. My voice lowered, every word like a cut to the ear. From now on, you will treat me with the minimum respect. Not because you like me, but because you're afraid of losing Claire. Because if you don't, everything in this envelope will go straight to her. And this time, I won't stay silent. She tried to laugh. Claire will never believe you. That girl was raised in my arms. She's not going to choose a penniless nobody like you over her own mother. I just smiled. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're not. I lifted the camera onto my shoulder. But are you sure you're willing to risk your relationship with your daughter? Just to win this power game against me? I didn't take a single photo that day. I left the envelope on the table and walked out of that house. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid anymore. 2 days after that confrontation, I received a package. No return address. Just my name. Ethan Rowe, handwritten in unfamiliar script. Inside was a USB drive and a small note. You should see this. Signed, Lena. I didn't know what I was about to uncover. But my hands trembled as I clicked open the first video files. What appeared on the screen was the security footage from inside Margaret and Robert's house. It had captured everything that happened the night of the birthday party. I saw Margaret in the kitchen. Saw her drop liquid into a separate glass. Saw myself walk in. Saw me switch the glasses. And then, Robert drinking from it. But that was only the tip of the iceberg. The next clip was after the guests had left. Margaret was yelling in fury. You drank the wrong glass. Robert, that was for Ethan. How could you be so stupid? Robert didn't hold back. How many times have you done this? Huh? Every time it's for Claire. For the family. I sat there, frozen. I had never imagined. This wasn't the first time she'd done something like this. The next clip was 2 days after the party. Margaret and Robert sat in the living room. The door was shut. He knows, Robert said. So what? Margaret replied, cold as ever. Claire will never believe him. I've already started planting doubts in her head about her career. Her future. Give it time. She'll think of divorce herself. And believe it was her own decision. I couldn't look away from the screen. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. This wasn't just poisoning. This was control. A long-running campaign of manipulation. I called Lena. Her voice was choked on the other end. They did the same thing to me. When I first married Nathan, Margaret called me a gold digger. She hid things around the house and blamed me for stealing. Robert looked me in the eye and said I wasn't worthy. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. Nathan didn't believe me. He idolized his father. I nearly lost everything until they had a grandchild. And started being nicer, because by then, they had leverage. I gripped the phone tightly. My hands were shaking. I couldn't just sit back and watch them destroy someone else, the way they once destroyed me. I thanked Lena. The next day, I got a message from Robert. We need to talk, man to man, no wife, no mother. We met in a VIP room at the golf club. Robert poured me a glass of whiskey. His eyes were sharp, his voice smooth as velvet. Family is always complicated. Margaret can be a little extreme, but she does what she does out of love for Claire. Drugging her son-in-law is love? I asked, still not touching the drink. He shrugged. Just a misunderstanding. The drug was a sedative. Maybe she mixed up the glasses. I reached into my bag and pulled out the USB. You should watch this. Then we can talk about mix-ups. The moment I placed the USB on the table, his expression changed completely. His voice turned low, dense. How much do you want? I don't want your money. Who do you think you are? Claire will never choose you over this family. Are you sure? She won't believe the video of her mother screaming. That was for Ethan. Or the clip of you saying, "This isn't the first time." Or Margaret declaring, "I've planted the seed of doubt. Divorce will feel like her idea." Robert didn't respond. For the first time, he lost control. I stood up. "I don't need you to like me. I don't need your approval. I just need you and Margaret to stay out of my marriage. If either of you crosses the line again, that video goes to everyone. Friends. Your club. Your business partners. The press. Everyone will see who you really are." For the first time since I'd met Robert, I saw him bow his head. That night, I didn't eat, didn't work. I just sat in the dark room. The blue light from my laptop casting long, distorted shadows across the walls. Claire came home late. Her face was tired, her eyes red and swollen. I didn't say anything. I just stood up and poured her a warm glass of water. "Today, Mom said you threatened her. At the photo shoot." Her voice trembled slightly. I nodded. I didn't deny it. "And I can see it. You've changed. You don't want to come to my parents' house. You don't want to have dinner. You don't even want to talk. Because I didn't want to drag you into this," I said softly. "Drag me into what?" Her voice rose slightly, then cracked. I took a deep breath. It was time. I opened the laptop, played the videos. Again, from the beginning. All the way through. Claire sat next to me, silent. When Margaret appeared on screen, dripping liquid into the sangria glass, Claire gasped. When Robert yelled at his wife, "This isn't the first time you've done this," Claire broke into tears. And when she heard her own mother say, "I've started planting doubts in Claire's mind. Just a little more time and she'll think of divorce, and believe it's her idea." Claire started shaking. "No, my mom, she couldn't." I placed my hand over hers. Not to hold her back, but to let her know I was still here. That I'd stayed long enough to endure. That I was still patient enough to wait. Claire pulled her hand away, stood up, ran into the bedroom. I didn't follow, because I understood. She needed to be alone with that pain. The next morning, Claire came out. Her eyes were swollen, red, but something in her gaze had shifted, a quiet awakening. I called my mom. She said, "What did she say?" "That you made it all up. That you were jealous of my family. That those videos could have been edited." "Do you believe her?" I asked, barely able to look her in the eyes. She didn't answer right away. She just sat down beside me. "I don't know what to believe anymore." Then she leaned her head on my shoulder. Her voice broke like a child lost in the dark. "All my life, I tried to make them proud. Even when I married someone they didn't approve of. I thought, if I worked hard enough, if I was good enough, they'd come around. But the truth is, they never wanted me to live my life. They only ever wanted me to live theirs." I said nothing. There were no words that could ease that kind of pain. Then Claire whispered, "You know what hurts the most? Not that my mother did this to you, but that she was willing to destroy her own daughter's marriage, just to win a pointless war." I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. In that moment, I didn't need her to choose me. I just wanted her to see herself. A few days later, Claire called Margaret. This time, she put the phone on speaker. "Mom, I've seen it all. Sweetheart, don't let Ethan manipulate. Don't say another word. Tonight, the whole family is coming over. Me, Ethan, Nathan, and Lena. We're laying everything out. No more secrets." Margaret went silent, then coldly said, "If you choose to believe him over your parents, then you're no longer the daughter I raised." Claire didn't respond. She hung up. Then she turned to me and said, "We're going. But this time, no one's staying quiet. I won't let them break anyone else again." That evening, we arrived at Margaret and Robert's house on time. Claire walked beside me, hand in hand, steady. Nathan and Lena were already sitting in the living room. Lena said nothing, just nodded gently at me, eyes filled with quiet solidarity. The room suddenly felt smaller than ever. No one touched the pastries. No one poured the tea. Robert spoke first, in a flat tone like discussing business. "I understand there may have been some misunderstandings. Perhaps things went too far." I cut in. "No, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is a confrontation." I pulled out a small camcorder, set it on the tripod. "I'm recording this conversation. Because this is about family. About memory. About truth. Margaret snapped. You have no right. I'm Claire's husband. I'm part of this family. Even though you've both done everything you can to shut me out. I spoke slowly, clearly, without fear. Then Claire looked at her parents. Her voice was calm, steady. I've seen it all. The videos, the audio, the confessions, the clip where Dad says, "This isn't the first time you've done this." The part where Mom says she'll make me think about divorce, and I'll believe it was my idea. No one replied. Claire turned to Nathan. Do you believe it? Nathan was silent. His eyes turned red. Lena placed a hand on his shoulder. They did it to us too. She whispered. You didn't see it, because you still believed in the image of a perfect family. But that image never existed. Nathan. Robert suddenly laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You think you understand what I've sacrificed? What Margaret has done to hold this family together? Claire finally broke. Not from weakness, but from enduring too much for too long. You don't love by controlling people, humiliating them, or poisoning your own son-in-law. Mom. The room felt airless. All my life, I've lived in a box you built. What to study, who to be friends with, who to love, it all had to be approved. I thought I escaped it when I met Ethan. But you never let me go. Margaret started crying, not out of remorse, but because she realized she'd lost control. Claire stood up. From this moment on, my life is mine. No more manipulation, no more coercion, no more silence. Nathan stood as well. Me too. My wife, my son. They won't be tools for anyone anymore. I handed Robert a USB. Everything is on here. Videos, drug analysis, witness statements. I don't want to destroy your reputation. But if either of you interferes again, it all goes public. Robert said nothing. For the first time, he looked at me, not with contempt, not with judgment, only helplessness. We left. No hugs, no goodbyes. None were needed. 3 months after that night, things finally began to settle. No word from Margaret's family. No Sunday dinners. No polite check-ins. Just a long, quiet distance between 2 generations. But for the first time in years, I saw Claire breathe freely. She no longer lived in tension. No longer tried to balance her love for her husband with her loyalty to her parents. She began therapy, and I stayed by her side, the way she used to silently hold my hand under the table during those loneliest dinners. Nathan and Lena started marriage counseling. They needed to heal, not just for themselves, but for their children, the ones who had overheard their grandparents whispering venom about their own mom and dad. Then one day, Claire walked out of the bathroom. She handed me a pregnancy test. 2 lines. A new life. We're going to be parents. She whispered, eyes glistening. I held her tight. Our child will grow up in a home where no one is controlled. No one is belittled. No one has to perform to be loved. I made that promise. To her. And to a child not yet formed. A month later, Margaret and Robert sent a handwritten letter. No apology. No excuses. Just a few quiet lines. We heard the news. Wishing you both health and happiness. If you ever need anything, we're still here. Claire didn't respond right away. She kept the letter in a drawer for a few days. Then one afternoon, she called her mother, her voice calm, firm. We'll allow you to meet the baby after she's born. But there will be clear boundaries. No judgment, no lectures, no control. Margaret replied with just one sentence. I understand. I didn't believe they had changed. But I did believe they were forced to, once they realized they no longer held power. The following summer, Claire gave birth to a baby girl. We named her Eliza, after my grandmother, the first woman who ever taught me about dignity and the worth of quiet kindness. Margaret and Robert came to the hospital. They brought expensive gifts, but this time, they kept their distance. No one tried to hold the baby without being asked. No one offered unsolicited parenting advice. They looked at Eliza with a kind of hesitation, as if they were staring at something sacred, that they no longer had the power to control. A few months later, I opened a small photo gallery in the city. On opening day, Claire stood beside me, holding Eliza in her arms. Friends, colleagues, people who'd seen my work in magazines, they all came to celebrate. And then, I saw them. Margaret and Robert, standing at the back of the room. Not pushing forward, not making conversation, just silently looking at the photographs hanging on the walls. Moments I'd captured with my heart. Not for money, not to prove anything, just because I wanted to live honestly. Before leaving, Robert walked up to me. He shook my hand. I was wrong about a lot of things. But you protected my daughter in a way I never could. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. Because by now, I didn't need their approval anymore. I had everything I needed. Claire, Eliza, a life where I didn't have to bow, didn't have to beg, didn't have to live in fear. That night, Claire and I sat on our porch. A soft breeze rustled the trees. Eliza slept peacefully in her mother's arms. Claire turned to me and whispered, "Do you think they've really changed?" I shook my head. No, but they know they can't change us. And that is enough. We sat there for a long time, watching the stars slowly appear in the summer sky. And in that moment, I understood something. I didn't win by getting revenge. I didn't win by dragging them down. I won because I stopped playing their game. I won because I stayed true to myself. And I'm not afraid anymore.